Welcome to the Secret Resume podcast. I'm Melody Moore, consultant, coach, and all-round curious human being. I've spent over 20 years helping leaders unlock potential, their own, their teams, and their organisations. On this podcast, we dive into our guests' messy, magical lives to hear the stories that don't make it onto their resume or their LinkedIn profile, but shape who they really are at work and in life. Before we dive in, I want to tell you about something that I'm really excited about, which is our Being Free membership. We're developing an online community which is designed for people who are interested in personal growth. If you're navigating career transitions, maybe feeling stuck or burnt out, or simply seeking more meaning in your life, then this is for you. Membership gives you access to a range of resources, a supportive community, and monthly group coaching calls. It will allow you to explore what freedom means to you on your own terms. Head to www.liberareconsulting.co.uk/being-free to join the waitlist. My guest today is Debbie Hayler. Debbie, so happy to have you here today. Sorry, losing my voice. So whilst I cough quietly in the background, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me on. It's my first podcast. I am very excited to be actually talking to you. And I think for me, it was the topic around what you guys talk about just interests me so much in the fact that hopefully what we're going to cover today is a lot of what shaped me is completely outside of my CV, and it's the way I look at L&D instructor. So I've worked in L&D for over 10 years now. Started at the bottom, which we'll touch on a bit later, and kind of now have built up to that leader strategic level. It's a weird one when someone kind of asks kind of who you are and how to introduce yourself. And I guess for me, I'm 33. I have a dog she's a Goldador. She is my fur baby. I am one of those kind of crazy dog moms. She is my baby through and through. She's normally sat in the office behind me and gets all the attention in any of my meetings. But whenever anyone kind of asks me who I am, it goes back to I am a crazy dog mom, and I love it, absolutely love it on that side of things. But yeah, it's always just an interesting one, and I think actually hopefully we'll find out more about me and what shaped me as we talk a little bit more today.
Fantastic. And I think we're going to talk about some really interesting things. But first I have to ask you, what is a Goldador? Because I've never heard of a Goldador before.
So she is a cross between a Labrador and a Golden Retriever. Looks more like a lab, but she's bigger. So she always gets called a boy, bless her, because she's a lot stockier. But yes, she's one of those fancy breeds of a mix.
No. My dog, people think she's a boy because she's got a beard, I think.
I always think it's one of those things that naturally you go towards whatever you have. I find myself saying that all dogs are girls because I've got a girl, and I think naturally if you've got a boy, you always call it a boy dog. So
yeah,
I've given up on the trying to dress her in pink to be like, no, she is a girl. I'm kind of just like, if you want to call her a boy, that's fine.
Exactly. No, and it's like I'm not putting quite a lot of my dog's clothes, not that she has many, but her little coat and things do look quite typical masculine colours. So it's kind of my fault too, but I'm kind of rebelling against, like, I'm not dressing her in pink just because she's a girl.
No, give up on that side of things, definitely.
So we could spend the whole podcast talking about dogs, and I would love that, frankly.
I think I could talk for hours about dogs.
Debbie met my dog because she was wanting to jump up on my knee, so you've already met mine. But let's dive into your story. Really looking forward to hearing you talk about this. So we're going to go right back to when you were at school.
Yes.
And certain things happened to you when you were at school. So do you want to start off by talking about that?
I guess for me, it's a phase of my life. I don't like to look back and regret things, but it's a phase of my life that I think now when I look back and think about it, really has shaped how I've got to where I have. I was bullied through school all the way back to when I was in primary school. So I never really had a great experience with it. I didn't know back then, but I suffered from IBS. And so back then it was something, I was looking into, and it was caused by stress. So it was an ever growing cycle of I'd go in, people would be like, why were you off? And then it would stem into kind of, oh, you're the girl that's always off all the time. But it would cause that ever growing cycle of then I'd be off through stress again. So from all the way from primary school over through to secondary school, I didn't have a great experience socially. It was never the fact that I wasn't academic. I was always quite into, I was very into biology and liked learning French and was very into the creative side of things. So it wasn't kind of the academic side. It was more, I think, the social aspect of school. And the bullying eventually led me to leaving school in year 9 to where I then was homeschooled. So homeschooling is a very different situation. I don't think, particularly at that point, you're not really able to learn too much more. So it's kind of like leaving in year 9, it was kind of just getting myself ready for GCSEs. So I didn't leave school with great GCSEs. I left with, I think, 4 GCSEs in the end. So I did go to college, which I guess gave me a different view on that social aspect. But I think by that point, I'd been a little bit scarred of the academic route. So university was out of the question for me. It wasn't, I didn't want to. I wanted to kind of move on from that chapter, I think. And I'd chosen to study performing arts at college. So again, nothing to do with where I'm at now. I've had a very kind of colourful past in finding my way through to where I am now, but it's shaped, I guess, how I think about it. And I think it's shaped a lot of how I now look at people and their potential. Because I think back, we're talking over 10 years ago now, probably, 33, we're talking probably more on the 15 years ago when you're starting to look on that, getting a job. I think back then academics was very important to people. I think there's still industries now where they will look and go, oh, you don't have a degree, so I'm not even going to bother interviewing you. Back then I felt that a lot when I was starting to look at jobs. It was kind of like, oh, well, you didn't get a degree, so how capable are you? It was always kind of that academic fit with your capability. So I felt getting the opportunity to get an interview was harder. I think once you were able to kind of talk around that a little bit more, it never affected me getting a job, but I think it definitely affected that opportunities that were opened up. And I think for me, without even knowing it, is probably what has stemmed part of where I've gone to into L&D, because I want to help more people that don't have that potential, that obvious, oh, you're really academic or you're book smart. It's more about, I always kind of say that life smart. You've picked up other skills through just experience and things. So, I think for me, I have always been very driven by being a certain title by a certain age. I think I've always kind of, once I knew what career I wanted to do, it's like, right, this is where I want to get to by a certain age. And then it was about, okay, how do I now prove that? And I think I always subconsciously in the back of my mind thought not having some of that academic would really affect where I was getting to. And I felt I had to kind of prove myself more than maybe someone that could go, well, I've been to university and I've got this degree, so I've obviously got these skills and this knowledge that this person over here wouldn't have. So there, I think it played a big part on that finding out as well. I think because I didn't go to university, I wasn't so set on what did I want to do. So my early career, I changed quite a lot in terms of different industries, doing different roles. I started out in retail. I've worked in office management. I qualified as a hairdresser. I've done fitness aerobic instructing. I went through a variety of different things before eventually falling into L&D, which I think most L&D people you talk to, I've yet to come across one that said, that is what I've always wanted to do. They go, oh, I just fell into it. But I think with that came some stigma as well. There was always that, oh, why did you move so much? And that, I think, kind of fueled something in me going, why are you looking at the negative side of it? That I've moved, but actually I've moved industries, I've moved careers, and along the line I've gained skills, different skills that now I'm able to utilize for the role that I'm in, even down to the retail customer service, first job at Waitrose. That customer service being kind of drilled into me was able to carry me through. So actually now I can really communicate with people. I can speak to them. I can empathize with them. I can, if they're upset, I've got that skill, that background. So I think as we kind of, I guess, talk more through my career and what I'm currently working on, it really does stem back to this, me not having that certificate that says I've got a qualification, and actually what skills have I gained along the way that has shaped me now. So
yeah, I'm interested in a few things actually that you just talked about. One is around, do you think being homeschooled, so therefore having an experience of a different kind of learning and education, do you think that plays out in terms of your approach to L&D?
I think not necessarily the homeschooled side of it. I think it opened my eyes to the ability to get to the same position as someone else without that piece of paper, which is why part of my career spanned very heavily on the apprenticeship side of things, and I'm still a huge advocate on that side. It's part of, it's where my career started, was graduates and working with graduates and working with apprentices, and actually seeing the difference between which skills they both bring, where their strengths are and where their development areas are. And that was quite interesting to see. I think the homeschooling side of things probably affected my imposter syndrome more than anything else. I think it led me to sort of thinking that actually I would be maybe more judged because I hadn't gone and got those, I don't have many GCSEs. And I remember, putting CVs together going, oh, this is going to be embarrassing. I'm going to put down, I've only got 4 GCSEs. I only have the equivalent, because I did a BTEC at college. So I've only got the equivalent to, I think it was an AS level. And I haven't gone to university. What's that going to mean for me? What are people going to think about that? Are they going to give me that opportunity? And I think some of that stemmed from being kind of shut down in places and people sort of being like, oh, you don't have that experience. And I would kind of go, okay, that's obviously that assumption of, well, I don't have a degree. So I think some of it is definitely that imposter syndrome that sits and lies around that. And as I said at the beginning, I don't like to regret a lot of things, but sometimes I do wonder if I hadn't gone homeschooled and I'd walked away with 12 GCSEs and then gone to college and done that normal route, would I be in a different position than I am now? What would that look like?
Have you? So I guess I'm curious as to how much you feel it's your imposter syndrome and you've held yourself back, and how much have you actually had a door shut in your face because you haven't got, all the qualifications?
It's an interesting one. I think the early days, I think I made a lot of assumptions around the fact that if I wasn't getting an interview, then therefore they were shutting me down for that reason. I think a lot of it stems from, I've always been very lucky that I can talk a lot. So interviews have never really been a struggle for me to show my true self and be able to kind of bring my best self to the forefront, I would say. But it was getting that opportunity was a bit harder. I think now working within HR and having been on the recruitment side a little bit and done, assessment centres, I see how companies have sifted CVs in the past, and there would, even it would go down to, well, they don't have a qualification or they haven't done extra, work experience, down to those kind of little things. And I sit there and I always go, well, then I wouldn't have made it in front of you. If that's how you're kind of deciding between who's going to get the opportunity to come in for an interview, I wouldn't have got that opportunity, because all the things you're saying is the tick box that you're looking for wouldn't have been there. And it's conversations I've had with managers at recruitment level. It's kind of like, are you looking between those lines? Are you looking at what they're trying to tell you between it, or are you literally just going, oh, no, no qualification, you're out? So I think, yeah, I've kind of seen it on two sides. So I do think I think less so now. I think the way that the industry is moving, it is moving more into that skills base, both on the L&D and the recruitment side. But I think going back to my early career, I think there would have been times where actually my CV was dismissed either due to lack of a degree or the fact that I had moved around jobs quite a bit, because that was always kind of seen as quite a negative thing from people.
It's interesting that you being there allows you to have that conversation. I think that's so powerful. And you can say to them, well, do you think I'm any good? Because I didn't tick any of those boxes. And I
Yeah,
think it shows how having diversity in a hiring situation is really important, because you can put a different perspective across.
it's definitely, I think, as I got into more of my senior roles and I was part of more of that recruitment phase, being able to kind of go, well, why aren't you giving apprenticeships more a chance? Because I think, when the apprenticeship levy came out and a lot of people were like, oh, well, do we want to get apprentices? I'd rather stick with the graduates. It was kind of like, you're not giving that other side, the non-traditional academic, those that actually learn better through doing. I've always been more of a, you show me something, or, I can then pick it up and I can do it. If you give me a book, it goes through one ear and out the other with me. And I think that's the opportunity that the apprenticeship versus graduate side of things is given a little bit more as well. So yeah, I think having that mixed diversity of backgrounds and starting to see that come through at leadership level is really refreshing, that it's not just people that have gone that traditional path anymore.
Well, and I think particularly with when I went to university, there was no cost to go to university. You paid and even you paid to live, but there was no fees.
Yeah.
But these days, it's so incredibly expensive to go to university that there'll
Yeah.
be a whole swathe of people that, regardless of whether they could or couldn't academically have qualified, will choose not to go because the cost, and they don't want to come out the other end with a massive debt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is, isn't it? It's quite that kind of interesting because, I mean, my partner, he went to university. I didn't. We now earn very similar, but actually what we take away is very different because he's now still having to pay back his university degree on that side. And actually, it's just quite interesting to see that we've both got to the same levels in our career and taken very different pathways. But yeah, financially, he is worse off on a month because he's having to pay that side of it. And, I completely, as we talk through more of the stages of my career that I've been through, I am a huge advocate for both the apprenticeship and the graduate side of things. It really shaped part of my career. So I'm not for one or the other, but I think it's really important that it's not looked upon that one is more important than the other in terms of having that certificate versus having those kind of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on then. We've got lots to talk about, but let's talk about, there was a TED talk in particular that you said really has stuck with you and really had a big influence on you. Do you want to say more about that?
Yes. So this was in my second role in L&D, kind of my first official. I ended up in my first role, ended up self-studying. So I'd kind of self-studied, got my first level 3 CIPD, was going into my first kind of proper L&D coordinator role, that was the title, and it wasn't kind of stemmed off something else. It was for a law firm in London. And the first day they basically said to me, can you go to a networking conference over the other side of London by yourself, come back and report on everything? And at that point I went, oh my God, this is way out of my comfort zone. One, I've got to find my way around London, which I'm not great at directions. Anyone that still meets me now will tell you that. Not great at directions at all. So that was playing through my head. And the thought of networking with other people at that point, I was kind of like, okay, I am going to have to network here with a bunch of people that have maybe been in this space for a while, know what they're talking about. And I went along, and I still to this day, I talk about this moment. I deliver training around this moment. I went along and was lucky enough to get to listen to Amy Cuddy's Presence TED Talk live in person, and got to meet her, still got my sign book from her. Pride of place takes place in my house because it really is a moment that shaped me. And if you haven't listened to her TED Talk, I would highly recommend it. It is all around, I guess one of her sayings from it is fake it till you become it. And it's quite an interesting one because you always say that to people and they go, well, why do you want to fake something? And actually the psychology, she's a behavioral scientist, and the psychology behind it is all around your body language and the confidence that you can give yourself just through your body language. And I fully believe that this shaped where I am now because I was able to trick my mind into faking how comfortable I was in situations until it became out of my comfort zone and I developed that skill. And so went into my comfort zone, should I say. So it kind of, I'd gone through that fear zone of going, okay, I don't maybe belong here. I always wanted to be in, when I'd figured out what L&D is, I was like, I want to be a trainer. I want to stand up there and I do want to deliver. That was my worst nightmare. The thought of standing up and talking in front of people was my worst nightmare. And going to this conference actually gave me the ability to go, well, I can trick my body language into telling myself that it's okay, that actually I am in a safe environment and I can do this. And I still use the techniques today. I teach the techniques out I've got a course called Building Confidence that I teach out, and we talk about how to move through your fear zones through to the development zone and getting out of that comfort zone and then making that thing become your comfort zone. And I think it's the most powerful thing. And I always say to people now, just fake it until you become it. And the fake it till you become it is that one day you do wake up and you suddenly go, actually, I can do this. This is, the same as me getting on a bike and just knowing how to ride it. Or, it becomes natural to you. And I think it's, for me, that has been a defining moment in how I am as an L&D person. And again, I think ties back to that, looking for people that maybe don't realize they have that potential there and giving them the skills they need to bring out that potential. So, it's not about, you can go and be a doctor if you don't have the qualifications. It's that, well, you do have the skill, the knowledge there, but you don't believe in yourself. And I think it has helped me move past some of that imposter syndrome in some places.
I love that. And I love that you met her and saw it live. That's fabulous.
Yeah, still got my picture.
I think that's amazing. She's known for the power stance thing, isn't she?
Yes.
Not this. It's not that, is it? It's this.
Yeah, it's the Superman or Superwoman pose that was branded on her. And she talks all about that in the podcast, in her TED Talk, should I say. But yeah, it's a pose I teach, and people always look at me like I'm absolutely crazy and I them to do it. But it's amazing what it can do to your mind. And obviously, the Superwoman, Superman pose is exaggerated. It's making yourself as big as possible, but it's actually about teaching yourself the smaller versions of that pose that you can do discreetly, that put yourself in a bit more of a state of mind. Because what she kind of talks around is the fact that animals, we are like animals. So if an animal is feeling scared, they get really small. If they're feeling confident and if they're the alpha, they get really big. And it's about using that to trick your mind in the same way as how you can change a conversation with someone just through your body language. You can actually change how you think as well through your body language. So I'd highly recommend it if you haven't watched the TED Talk yet.
And I 100% agree. And I think quite often as L&D professionals, we think that we have to change someone's mindset first,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when you think about organizational change, for instance. People think,
Yeah.
someone has to believe something in order to do it. I don't believe that. I think that you can focus on the behaviors first and the mindset will come afterwards. You don't have to be constantly trying to influence people purely through the sort of intellectual or emotional or whatever it is. So I'm totally with you that there's something about accepting and acknowledging that behavior can come first.
Yeah.
And I don't use her phrase, but fake it till you make it has long been a phrase of mine. And I think it applies to all sorts of things. I've applied it even to things like empathy. If you say to somebody, "Oh, that must have been really difficult for you," if you're not naturally an empathetic person, actually doing some empathetic things and saying some empathetic things might then make you think, oh, actually, maybe it was difficult for them. And it kind of puts you in, it's really clever, I think, to think of it that way round rather than always.
Kind of tricking your psychology, isn't it? It's tricking your brain of, I'll do it even now when I'm presenting. I remember when I first started doing my Building with Confidence course, I was doing it to apprenticeships, my apprentices and my grads. And they are, that's the one thing I absolutely love about working with younger generations than me is they will just tell you. They will be brutally honest with you. And in this course, one of the things I actually get them to do for my own learning and to almost kind of reassure them that it's okay as well is I will ask them to tell me where I wasn't confident when I was presenting, what I was doing. And through that, I've learned different things that I was doing that then I was able to reverse and put in coping mechanisms for myself, even down to a small thing they spotted out was if I'm confident in a subject, I would roll my sleeves up. And if I was not feeling too confident, I would roll them down. So I started wearing short sleeve tops. But then I couldn't. I had nowhere to do that action. And then it got to a point where that was almost trained out of me. It was kind of like, well, you don't need to do that anymore. You couldn't do it. So now you won't do it. And now I can wear long sleeve, short sleeve tops and it doesn't manifest in that same way. And so I do truly think that, as you said, it's, we talk about mindsets a lot, and in L&D, mindsets are a strong area where, as a company, I guess that's an end goal of a lot of companies. It's the mindset we want to build as a company, but actually, it's that behavior. And I guess in the same way as animals, in the same way when we were talking about dogs, you train a dog and you have to train them several times. You're training yourself and you're training your brain in that same way. And I think that's really part of what she dives into with that psychology is the fact that if you're not comfortable and you send your brain signals you're not comfortable, you always won't be comfortable. But if you're not comfortable and you trick your brain into thinking that you are actually okay in that scenario, it will become easier and you'll be okay with that situation. So yeah, it's definitely shaped how I do things. I find myself when I'm standing up presenting, I might accidentally cross my legs and I'll go, oh no, quickly uncross your legs, because you'll start to send signals that you're not happy up here presenting anymore. And it's always quite an interesting one when you look at kind of female male dynamics as well in that sense, because through history, women are taught that you cross your legs or you cross your ankles and that makes you more kind of ladylike and you're to sit more ladylike, whereas men would have their legs a bit more kind of wider open. And actually just that tiny small movement is sending signals to your brain that maybe you're not as comfortable or as confident in that area. So it's
you're smaller, isn't it? It's like not taking up as much space.
Absolutely.
And that has such a broader application in terms of the space that you take up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even that now when, if I'm presenting or talking, I always tend to use my hands because it's about making yourself bigger. And I was listening to Diary of CEO. There was a podcast on there recently about public speaking, and he was kind of talking about just even the angle, the way your hands, like body language fascinates me and always has since I listened to this podcast. But there's so much I think you can just do to put yourself in that comfortable position. And there's say fake it till you become it or fake it till you make it. It is that you're not I say that to some people and said they're always like, oh, why would I want to fake it? And it's actually like, you're not faking something you don't want. You're faking the thing you want until it becomes part of you and it becomes natural. So
yeah, I love that. It's tricking yourself.
mm.
So you mentioned there you worked with grads, you've worked with apprenticeships. I'm
Yeah.
saying that wrong. Let's talk about the grads first. Yes, that was
Yeah.
the empowering leadership. Is that right?
Yeah. So my first job, I actually started this job as just a kind of team assistant to a finance team. And I was eager to get involved in more. And that is where I kind of met my first empowering leader that really kind of showed me what L&D was. She was very much, and for me, empowering leaders all comes back to one thing that they all kind of said to me, I trust you, now make it happen. And, at that time, as I said, I was working as a team assistant. She was running this global graduate program and she wanted help developing it down to, even at that point, it was developing the policies, putting on their huge graduate conference. And that to me really opened my eyes of that ability to see people grow into their best selves. And that for me was kind of that light bulb moment. I was like, this is the thing that's going to give me satisfaction, because all the other jobs I'd had, for example, hairdressing, I loved hairdressing, but I remember getting promoted and I was like, I'm just still going to be cutting hair and I'm going to see the same clients every 6 to 12 weeks. I was like, it's not fulfilling me. I can't see myself doing this forever. And we're kind of getting involved where it was that, not micromanaging, not telling me I have to just go and write this document or put schedule together. She really wanted to know my thoughts. She wanted to kind of go, we're looking to do this. What could you do from it? I'm going to entrust you to come back to me and make something happen in this area. And I learned so much from those graduates. They were international. So the way the graduate program worked there is that their second year, they would go into a different role in a different country. And that was so rewarding to be able to get that kind of knowledge from different cultures as well, and see how they learn, how they engage, what their aspirations were. And it's seeing that growth of them coming in, they're coming from university, they're fresh out of school. This is their first kind of real job experience, and watching some of them, now I'm still in touch with some of my first graduates. They're directors at companies. And I'm like, to be able to say that I played a part in that I helped you think about where your career was going, that I went, that's what I want to be doing. And that, I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't even qualified in L&D then, didn't really know what it was. And she just took a chance on me. So that was my first, I think that was my first opening my eyes to L&D, but also opening my eyes to what leadership should be and what I would want out of a manager, and what really helps build and guide you. And then as I kind of went through my, I haven't always had great managers and leaders, I think, like all of us, but I landed my role at Surrey Satellite, and there I started as maternity cover, and my manager there again just went, I trust you, now make it happen. And the trust she gave me was bigger at the time than what I thought I should be getting. So that was when apprenticeship levies just come about, and she went, we want an apprenticeship program. You go, you create it. And to be given that opportunity, and she kind of went, I'm here, but you've got this. You just go. If you need something, I'm here, but I fully trust you just to get on with it. And, apprenticeships have always they've always had a soft spot in my heart, because I think not only were they defining in the fact that they were part of that journey of me growing as an L&D professional, but I was also part of their journey in that same way. And I think there is a huge power in having leaders around you that don't micromanage, that really kind of go like, well, I hired you to do a role. I'm not going to restrict you in that role either. I want you to come to me with ideas. And obviously, there's always a level of, or maybe we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z, but there was always an answer as to why we couldn't do it. It wasn't just shut down as, I haven't asked you to do this or told you to do this. And that has, for me, I always look back and go, two people that got me to where I am today in my career, it's going to be my first manager, Sati, who just introduced me to the world of L&D and was happy to bring me on that journey. And then my manager that saw me grow from that coordinator all the way through to manager and supported me on that journey, Marie, they play a huge part into how I've got to where I am today.
And you said, obviously you've worked with both apprentices and graduates. You said that you can see some clear differences, some similarities. How would you classify those?
So I think the similarities is that they are both really fresh into the workplace. They want to get somewhere. I always remember having one of the things we did early with both our grads and apprentices is talking to them around what they wanted, what they see in 5 years. And they always have that kind of, that almost kind of unsquashed aspiration of where they want to get to. Nothing's too far reach from them. I remember talking to one of my apprentices early when we did the PDP with them, and they were like, in 2 years, I want to be the CEO. And I thought, do you know what? Just having that aspiration is amazing. And I don't want to squash that. I want to make that I want to make that aspiration come true to a degree, but in a way that you can actually achieve that. I don't want to squash it and say, 2 years, so you having a laugh, kind of, you're not going to go from apprentice to CEO in 2 years, but actually going, okay, we want to get to CEO. So what do we need to do then? What's that pathway going to take? And I think the differences that I see between them is your grads come in and they have that built knowledge. So they have that kind of understanding there because that's what they've studied. But I would always see that they would a lot of the time lack that confidence to go and approach people. They would lack the kind of communication, the more, I guess, behavioral soft skill side of things versus your apprenticeships when they come in. There's that ability that they need to learn that skill. They need to learn that knowledge, that technical side of it. But they come in with the questions. They're not afraid to communicate. And because they're growing with the company, they're building that technical knowledge at the same time as they are learning the world of, the corporate industry, that being not afraid to ask questions that maybe graduates might find a little bit more like, oh, if I ask that question, am I going to look stupid? Apprenticeships, they don't have that care. They're kind of like, I want to learn as much as possible and I will ask as much as possible and I'll go out there and get it. And I remember my first cohort in the apprenticeship program. I actually took a break from L&D after I was at SSTL. And that was through management changing, and me and the new manager were on just different waves of working. And it really started to make me question myself as did I really want to do L&D anymore? Was I enjoying it? But I made a promise to myself I wouldn't leave until my first cohort had finished their apprenticeship scheme. And watching them grow from, some of them were as young as 16 when they first started with us, and watching them grow and have that confidence in them was so rewarding for me. And I think it's something I look back on because they taught me as much as hopefully they learn on the program. But I fully believe there is a power of that reverse mentoring. And there's that power of, if you want to get to a good level of leadership, you really need to understand that any level, any generation. They can come in and they can teach you just as much as you can teach them. And, they really did. As I said, they tested me, and I grew with them. I went from being a coordinator to a manager in the same space that they came in as 16-year-olds and completed their program. So they helped me develop my training skills. They helped me develop my manager skills. And, there were definitely testing times through a brand new apprenticeship program. But I think that's been for me one of the most rewarding parts that I look back on so far. And it's so nice to see them still thriving and really achieving. I love looking and seeing that they've got to where they told me they wanted to get to now.
And what would you say in terms of, a lot of the people I will work with, for instance, and I'm sure lots of other L&D professionals will maybe work with people who are much later on in their career. How would you say it's different working with, kids who are, basically my daughter's age, or, graduates not much older? Or is there a difference? Do you notice, I suppose, between maybe a 16-year-old and a 21-year-old? Is there a big difference there? Or, I'm just thinking about this whole kind of generational differences, etc. I'm just really interested in your view.
I think each of them have their strengths, and I think everyone can always be developing. I think for those that are new into the work world, whether that's graduates, apprenticeships, or you're swapping a career and you're just starting, I think, as I said, there's that level of they're willing to ask more questions because they want to know more. You still sometimes get that level of, well, I maybe deserve more. I think sometimes in the younger generations, a lot of it comes around to that kind of money side of things. Everyone wants to buy a house. So a lot of what I've found with, like, if you're having PDP conversations and you're saying, where do you want to see yourself? It's earning a certain amount of money. It's not so much attached to that career side of it. And then as you dig deeper into it, it comes out that actually there is drivers that they want to do in terms of their career. And it is more than just that money side of things. And then on the flip side, I think with managers, sometimes there's that scaredness to ask questions because it's like, okay, well, I'm already at a leadership level, so surely I should know this. And sometimes there's that unwillingness to want to learn because, again, you have that facade around you that, well, if you're a leader. But I think it does come back to the company culture a lot of the time and the companies that you're in. And if you're seeing your CEO heading off to do a course, it's that, oh, well, they're still learning. So it's okay here for me to want to question and grow my skills and grow that knowledge base. And I think I think it's stupid at any age to assume that more or less, learning, as I said, learning that reverse mentoring and learning so much from my apprentices from almost, I think, one of the things I really learned from the apprentices is not to be so bothered about that perception of what other people think of me. And I think that sometimes a lot of companies can get so caught up in we need to develop our leaders because if we develop our leaders, that will fix everything. And they forget that actually the leadership makes up a small amount of the company. And whilst it's really important for your employees to have those leaders that are guiding them in the right way, we also need to listen to the vast majority of our employees that are at all different levels, at all different generations. How do they learn? What do they want to be getting out of their roles? And it's quite scary. I'm seeing quite a lot now when you're looking over social medias that new generations don't want to go into those leadership roles. They don't want to be a manager. And it's that question of, well, why? What are they seeing that now has kind of stopped that? And they just want to kind of go in and do a job where maybe they're just technically the expert in that job, but they don't want that extra management level of responsibility anymore. So it's always quite interesting seeing two and spanning across the different levels. I think there is true power in that reverse mentoring. I think a lot of people will go, well, we need to put a mentoring program on. And it's always, well, our more junior people in the company need to be mentored by our leadership. But actually, if you reversed that, what could they learn in terms of just how do they talk to, it could be, how they just talk to different generations, or could they learn a mannerism that could actually help them a little bit more as well?
I'm just going to pause a second because my dog needs to get out the room. Hold on a sec.
That's okay.
Growling at the door.
She's had enough. No, can't listen to this anymore.
She can't hear because she's I've got my headphones on, so she's not listening. Brilliant. Right, let's move on to your last thing that you can talk about, which is an award that you won. Tell me about that, why it was so important to you.
Yeah, so end of last year, I want to say, I won my first ever award. It was the Silver Award for Best Implementation of New Learning System. I think it was one of those kind of surreal moments of every company, I always make this joke, every company I've been in, I always seem to end up putting a new learning platform in place. It's one of those things that follows me along with GDPR. I always seem to manage to get myself involved in that side of things as well. But learning systems have always been one of those things that, by all means, it's not the part of my job that really drives me and gets me out of bed, but I love the outcome and what you can do with it and shape with different systems and putting them in. And when I joined the company that I'm at now, they didn't have a platform. They had a very basic, just pushed out compliance. And so we were looking at what we could put in. And I remember very early saying to them, did they want something from a platform that would solve what they needed now, or did they want something that would grow with them? And so we settled on LXP platform, and the award kind of came out of nowhere, really. It was one of those where I'm very lucky in this role. The CEO is all for people's development, and I've never heard a CEO get up in front of their company and say that we want to develop you to the best you can be, even if that means we lose you because we don't have the role available for you here. We don't want to stunt that. And I think that's really powerful. And I remember saying, I'd come into this role again on a maternity cover, and I remember saying that they've got the buy-in there already. They've almost done the hard part, because normally when you go into companies to do L&D, it's really trying to get that buy-in from the leadership or employees to determine how important that was, and already having that at that leadership level. And my manager, Nikki, in my role at the moment, again, was hugely on that development side, and is another person that was kind of like, I trust you, now go and make it happen. And it wasn't something they were considering, and we kind of just evaluated what we wanted to do, and we're putting this platform in, and we'd done the implementation side, and it was Nikki that kind of came to me and went, let's submit it for an award. And I kind of I remember sort of laughing it off as though but it's just putting another system in. It's something I've done many times. I don't know whether we'd get anything from that, but I wrote the submission and talked all around it. Really, it drove back to, I think the reason that we were able to get silver really came all the way back to the engagement side of things. And I think a lot of that, and the reason that it's been quite a defining moment, is because I think it captured everything that had happened in my career that brought me to where I am now, that means the most to me. So it's how could you get the potential out of people that maybe don't have that confidence there, or know that they've got that potential. And it was looking at something completely different. It allowed us to look at it from a different angle. So we've moved into a skills first approach in the company. So it's not about your experience. It's not about your qualifications you have. It's about the skills you have and how confident you feel in those skills. And then us being able to direct the learning into that. I'm actually talking at the Learning Tech Awards in April at the end, a lot more around what was involved in this implementation side of things and why it ended up being award winning. But to be able to, I remember we were sitting with the providers of the platform. How Now is the providers of the platform we use, and we were sitting with them at the awards. It was quite interesting doing the paneling, because you go online it was on a Zoom chat, and it was just a panel of 3, and we didn't even finish our presentation, and me and Nikki got off after, and we both just went, we're not going to get anything from it. Like, we've been nominated. Let's just take that we got, we got to the point of they actually wanted to panel us. And we went along to the awards, and I remember sitting there with my colleagues and the team at How Now, and it was the biggest category. All the others had about 5. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, why is my name not come up? And it's going through. There's like a category of about 9 people, and ours was named the last one that was in that category. And I was like, okay, I haven't just imagined that. I was like, okay, we did actually get through to this stage. I haven't just completely imagined that side of things. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we're up there. And I remember my friend, she took a picture of the fact that we were up there. She was like, well, if we don't win, at least you've got your name on the big screen that we've actually kind of got that far to be nominated. And they're going through, and I hear them kind of say the bronze, because in the category there's the gold, silver, bronze. I hear them say the bronze, and I was like, no, we definitely haven't got it then, because we're not going to get silver or gold. And I remember them saying silver, saying our name, and I just looked at someone and went, what? I just completely went, huh? Like, what? Like, was that to the point where I, at that point, had no clue who had got gold, because I was in absolute disbelief that we had managed to get silver. And I remember just after the shock had kind of settled in, I just remember like crying of like, this for me meant so much that it was kind of like, actually, I think for the first time I'd gone, I actually am quite good at this. I am an expert. Like, I think all of that imposter syndrome in that moment started to really disappear, and I was like, I can now call myself a leader in the L&D space, and I can actually say I'm pretty amazing at this. And it's something that I can't, I think I've always listened to podcasts, gone to conferences, heard speakers talk about things, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to be the one inspiring people. And actually just, yes, would I have loved to have got gold? Yes. But actually, to be able to get silver, we were only, I think, 4 months after launching. So it hadn't been implemented that long. We didn't have a lot of ROI on it. So to be able to actually get silver, because of the fact that we'd put our employees and what they wanted first through all of that, and we'd included them as part of the process. And I just went, everything that I've tried to achieve of, people that maybe sometimes get overlooked, whether it's companies are focusing on leadership, so employees get overlooked, someone hasn't got that degree, so they're getting overlooked. Like, what I'd been able to put in that moment is going to help those people. And yeah, it was quite surreal. I still, my boss made a joke because it took a while for the trophy to make it to work, and she kept saying, we're never going to see it. I was like, no, I just keep forgetting it. Like, honestly, I just keep forgetting it. But I think it still for me is one of those kind of pinch me moments of, I'm like, I've actually done that. And it started to kind of click into place for me from there. I think that's the part where I went, I've actually become what I was trying to be. So yeah, it was definitely a change.
Well, amazing. And speaking of inspiring people, so my next question's about what's next, and more inspiring people sounds like it's on the agenda.
Yeah. So I think having now come to that kind of self-realization of my own skills. I want to definitely get into that space of putting myself out my comfort zone. I think for a while I've wanted to be more of that thought leader. I've always, that's kind of, I think, where I've wanted to get to, and be able to really share what I'm doing, my thought process around it. So it's putting myself out my comfort zone. Coming on here was the first step of that. I think there's a lot that I've shared on here that I maybe haven't always been I'm quite a private person, and so I don't always maybe touch base on my bullying unless I know it's going to help someone or in that front. But I think now that I've kind of come to that space where I don't feel like I'm an imposter anymore, that I really want to start talking on podcasts more. I am very lucky that I'm going to be speaking at the Learning Tech conference in April. So that is going to be my first time speaking in a conference. So it's definitely out of my comfort zone, but it is something I'm very excited to do. I really want to talk to people in the space around the strength of those skills and the power that actually skills and moving into that skilled focus space can bring. Me and one of my colleagues who works on the HR side are looking at actually starting our own podcast, where it kind of talks about more of the kind of, it's called, it's going to be called That's Not in the Handbook. And so it's looking at looking at it from a different lens, I guess you'd say, of that kind of, how can you, I'd almost say, ticking the boxes of what I've talked about in this podcast, of if you don't tick all those traditional boxes of what someone's looking for, what does that mean for you in your career, and how can you actually still get to where you want to? So yeah, for me, I think what's next is putting my voice out there, stepping outside my comfort zone again. I think now that I've realized I've reached where I wanted to get to, it's definitely time to stretch myself again. I don't think I could be an L&D leader if I wasn't constantly stretching myself. So it's getting out of my comfort zone, speaking to more people about what I'm passionate about, why I, do what I do. I am actually going to be starting a new role at the end of April as well, where I'm going to be building an L&D function from scratch, which is very exciting, to be given a blank sheet of paper and really help evolve a company to where they want to get to is very exciting as well. So a lot of new things coming. And yeah, hopefully this won't be the last podcast I do and the last time you've heard of me.
April sounds like a big month for you then.
Yes. Yeah, got a lot to do in that month. But yeah, no, exciting. Nerve-wracking, but exciting.
And then looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
It's always an interesting one. Again, when I think about kind of I don't live on regretting things. I think there's always a lesson in everything. I think for my younger self, I am always a perfectionist. I always have been. I always say I've got borderline OCD sometimes. If you looked in my kitchen cupboards, you'd probably agree. But I think one of my biggest lessons I've learned through this year is progression, not perfection. And the things don't have to be perfect to where you want to be to actually make a difference. That actually there is a lot of value from gaining that feedback, working with, your customers, your stakeholders on things, and to be, particularly in L&D, to be able to build that out. That us as L&D professionals don't know everything. We don't have all the answers. So actually we can't make things perfect without that network around us, without working with our customers. And I think that is probably something if I could go back and say to my younger self, what would I do differently, is to enjoy the process more and not get so hung up on perfection and just go with the progression of things instead.
What would you say to the people who bullied you in school?
I think that's a really hard one. I think that is, again, because I don't regret things, there's been a lot of times of me processing that. So I don't think for me, I look back at that now and there's not I think it helped shape me. I think it did make me stronger and more empathetic to people. So it sounds probably a weird thing to say. I probably wouldn't change it because it's who I am now. And for me, it wasn't, I think a lot of the time when people think of bullying, they think of either physical or that you have to be able to say something really concrete. So I think just not so much saying to those that bullied me, but sometimes just really think about how you're saying something to someone, because how they interpret it could be very different. And you don't know what people are going through. So it's kind of having that consideration around that is probably where I'm kind of at with that. I think I don't know whether I've probably fully healed from that time, if I'm going to be completely honest, but I think I've let go of it. I think I've moved on from it and learned that actually, I think I've made it into a superpower as opposed to dwelling on it.
Yeah, love that. Books. Any books that you would recommend?
I mean, I'm looking at it right now. My Amy Cuddy. I mean, it's my signed copybook presence. I'm gonna keep talking about her. I think for me, Presence. I'm not a huge book person. I've only recently got back into reading, but because that changed my life so much, and there's so much more detail in her book than there is on her TED Talks, I'd highly recommend that. There are a few podcasts that I've listened to recently that I definitely want to see if they've got any books. As I said, I'm trying to get myself into reading. I think it's important to switch off from those things. So I definitely find that reading helps you disconnect from digital technology that is around us all the time today. But yeah, it's got to be Presence. It's got to be Amy Cuddy.
And what title would you give to your story?
I think it has to derive from, I still believe that the Amy Cuddy TED Talk played a huge part. So her fake it till you become it is definitely part of it. I think I faked it. I became it. And I think now I'm heading into my chapter of I'm starting to own it.
Love that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm so honoured that I am your first podcast.
Thank you for having me on here. I mean, honestly,
you're very welcome.
It has been amazing talking to you, and even this has completely, I think, opened up my eyes to just how much I want to start sharing more with people out there. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. This podcast is brought to you by Liberare Consulting. If you enjoyed today's show, why not click on the subscribe button so you are among the first to hear about new episodes? And we would love for you to do us a favour and click on the share button and share this episode with one of your friends.